Grace and peace to you from God who meets us in the silence and in the noise. Amen. Well, friends, I have been back to work after several months since Elijah's birth. And one of the questions that people like to ask me is, who looks after Elijah while you are at church? Well, when I respond, most of the time that's me, I hear a mix of reactions. And there is Elijah and I after leading the Friday prayer service together. He's also been to lots of staff meetings. He was at Vacation Bible School in June. He's visited lots of our homebound members as well. Now, friends, don't get me wrong. I know that I am blessed. I haven't missed a moment with my son. I've been there for every change that has happened in the last 5 months. And I know that he is thriving in this environment. I can tell that he is already cared for, supported, and loved by this congregation and by the staff as well. I told myself I wasn't going to cry through this, friends. But navigating motherhood and this call to be a pastor has been really difficult. And I would be lying if I said that it has been smooth sailing. There have been a lot of moments where I have wondered if I can do both, if I can be both mother and pastor. I have felt really overwhelmed many times these last couple of months. So I really identify with Elijah, the prophet, not my son, in our story for today from 1 Kings. You see, friends, after lots of success in his ministry, Elijah is now experiencing the opposite. He is overwhelmed. He feels like he is the only one left. He's made some enemies, and Elijah is now running for his life. He feels abandoned and alone. And he wonders, can he do what he has been called to? And in our gospel story for today, the disciples who find themselves in a wayward boat being pushed away out by a storm experience Jesus walking towards them, but they don't recognize him at first. And when they do, Peter decides to get out of the boat and walk toward Jesus on the water, only to become afraid and begin to sink. And all he can do is cry out to Jesus as that water flows over his head. I imagine Peter feels a whole lot like Elijah. He knows that overwhelming feeling. He knows fear. He knows what it feels like to doubt his own abilities and doubt himself. And he knows what it feels like to doubt God. I would guess that many of us have felt these emotions before. Not just new moms like me trying to juggle both of their jobs. We've all experienced that feeling when life just feels like it's too much. We've all had moments where we have felt abandoned and alone. We've all felt like it's all on us, like it's all on our shoulders, like we are the last ones left. In Eugene Peterson's The Message translation of the Bible, Jesus' question to Peter, "Why did you doubt?" is translated as, "What got into you?" Other voices get into us. Their messages seep into our brains, telling us lies about ourselves, and they make us doubt ourselves and doubt God. And even voices from within us can cause us to doubt, right, friends? Growing numbers of people experience what psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes call imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome makes people doubt their skills, abilities, their talents and accomplishments, and causes them to have a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as frauds. I wonder if Elijah felt like this. In both of our stories for today, God acts to respond to those emotions and those situations. In both stories, God meets Elijah and Peter and the disciples as a collective where they are at. God comes to them and has something important to say. God meets them in unexpected and surprising ways. In 1 Kings, God meets Elijah in the silence. Many of us are afraid of silence. I am. We like to fill our days with noise and distractions. Sometimes we use that silence or that noise to fill that feeling of loneliness. We use noise to make us feel like we're doing something. Or in my case, noise follows me wherever I go these days, and I forget what the sound of silence is. But I experienced it recently, and I was able to recognize it. In fact, one morning this week, the dog slept on the couch, Elijah played on his playmat, and I was able to read my Bible and do my devotions uninterrupted for the first time since Elijah was born 5 months ago. Friends, I needed that. God met me where I was at. God spoke to me in the silence. So I wonder, how has God met you in the silence? How has God spoken to you by quieting the world around you? And in our gospel story, Jesus surprises the disciples as he walks on the water toward them. After grabbing Peter's hand, Jesus calms the storm. The winds and the waves give way to peace. When waves are crashing over us, friends, Jesus acts quickly for us, to catch us, to reassure us that we aren't alone, that we aren't imposters, that we are beloved, that we are capable, that we can count on God, and that we can count on others. Many times it's the hands of other people pulling us up when we need it most. In the silence, God also spoke to Elijah and gave him direction and instruction. God says, "Go find Elisha. He will be a prophet in your place." And this instruction is applicable to us as well, friends. Because as difficult as it may be, go ask for help. You don't have to do anything alone. That has been my learning curve these last few months. Ask for help. Accept the help. It is not failure. It is not wrong. But it is brave. And it is wise. And it is the right thing for us to do when we are feeling overwhelmed. Friends, when we are feeling like Elijah and Peter, it is easy for us to go hide in a cave, like Elijah did, to isolate ourselves. But we aren't meant to be alone, friends. We weren't created to do everything ourselves. So when we feel like Elijah and Peter, let's remember the church. Let's remember each other. Because this community is the people. And as people, we are gifts of God to one another. We were created to be together, to lean on each other, to have each other's backs, to encourage one another, and to lift one another up. God speaks to us through each other. God encourages us through each other. And God meets us where we are at through each other. We get to reveal God's presence when we show up for one another. When my Elijah was born, I heard that many of you exclaimed, "Of course a pastor would name her son Elijah." Friends, Elijah has this name for many reasons. I'm not going to tell you all of them right now. But I am going to say that Kyle and I purposefully and intentionally named our child after a biblical prophet. A prophet whose courage and conviction called him to share God's good news, but also someone who experienced God's presence and God's grace in some really tough situations. When Elijah cries, I sing, and I remind him, "You are never alone. I have you. I am with you. I am here." So friends, I leave you with that same message today. You are never alone. God has you. God is with you. And God is here. Amen.